Greetings and welcome to today's webinar, CH2M Hill, Intelligent Modeling Maximizes Interoperability for Cross-Discipline Project Teams, presented by Bentley Systems. Hello, I'm Paul Bonington, Vice President and Publisher of Engineering News Record, and we're very pleased to host today's program. Before I introduce the speaker, I would like to review a couple of housekeeping items for you. There will be a Q&A session today near the end of the presentation. You can pose a question at any time by typing your question in the white box at the bottom left-hand side of the player and selecting Submit. We will try to get to as many questions as possible in the time allotted. If you experience any technical difficulties, audio or video quality, for example, please indicate this via the question box as well, and someone from the production team will address your issue directly. If you are experiencing any difficulties hearing audio, please first try to select a different media option by selecting the button labeled Select Media option located on the left-hand side of your player under the speaker headshot. You can also select the Help menu located on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. To increase the volume during the webcast, please select the volume bar and increase to the desired level. Please also make sure your computer speakers are turned up. If you wish to see the slides in full screen mode, please select the button labeled Full Screen Mode located below the slide window. Okay, let me introduce today's special guest. Brent Mouty is a practicing architect and principal technologist and global technology leader for modeling, design, and drafting with CH2M Hill. In addition to acting as project architect, he also functions as the BIM delivery leader for CH2M Hill across the globe, with experience on the London 2012 Olympics and other major design and construction management projects from multiple business groups. So let me turn this now over to Brent Mouty from CH2M Hill. Brent?
Thank you. And thank you everybody for calling in. And just as a minor extension, I also have a overall global focus, which is on data interoperability, platform interoperability, and global delivery. And that will hopefully be shown throughout the duration of the slides. So very quickly, this year we saw a couple of BIM reports that were published from various authors, this one from the UK. And I'm not going to go into any detail on them, but I just wanted to stress staff are likely to turn to colleagues and vendors seen as requiring a change in workflow, brings on efficiencies, increases productivity with respect to delivery. Levels of BIM adoption, focusing just on North America, have steadily increased in the last 5 years. For us, CH2M Hill falls in the large bracket, and more companies are expressing themselves as being BIM adopted companies with respect to use of the products and tools. Focusing for us, the contractors and the owners, more and more of our supply chain, and especially our clients, are now requesting or mandating some type of BIM, whether it's BIM delivering us just models, or BIM we want to leverage information for some type of downstream use. And that is continually growing and continually putting with respect to how we deliver. Long-term benefits, I really like these ones where repeat business, reducing construction cost, reduced errors and omissions on documents in the short term, and reducing rework in the short term. So just laying that as a premise, CH2M Hill, as we apply BIM globally, BIM is really applied in a multidiscipline fashion. So all of our design technologies are working and functioning in the same virtual space, developing models and information simultaneously. We have this, quote, single combined model, which could be one central repository, a collection of federated models, etc. But BIM in a nutshell is geometry plus something put together. Data can vary depending on the component, depending on the output, depending on the data needs. But when we deploy, as long as the components we model are known, they know what they are, then everything is fundamentally BIM. And then we've migrated from 2D. When I initially started, BIM was in its infancy within the firm, but it was still being done on select projects. This was the mode of delivery. This became this. So this was one of my projects 10 years ago, and you can see the difference, the amount of information, the robustness of the visual acuity of what you're trying to portray versus that section. And we have several examples now where we can take our models that we've developed, go off to site, and do a compare and contrast. And I'm always amazed when I see the finished product being very close to what was within those design models. And if the design models continue through construction, those as-built BIM models are pretty spot on. The graph, it's the McClinley curve, seen in every single type of BIM documentation, from conceptual through to construction. You can change things far easier in concept than you can during construction, and it's far more expensive to change during construction than it is during concept. And we want to take that effort and push it so that the decisions made are robust and accurate as early in the project as possible. And CH2M Hill has gone through a lot of efforts to define workflows, procedures, change management, and design checklists in order to help us be a little more diligent with respect to applying this conceptually. It's always difficult not to want to go at the last minute and make those minor changes and want to erase stuff like we used to do on paper. All change can still be done, but it all has to be done in the coordinated manner. So when I present BIM, I try to focus on what can you do and why. So the model is the hub, the heart of BIM. Everything happens, it's the single source of truth. Now, we use the Penn State BIM execution plan as a template for our project-specific execution plans. And I like that plan because it defines the BIM goals. And you select the goal that you need to achieve on the project, either to achieve internal efficiencies, to meet client needs, or to better deliver, etc., and you define your goals. So when you look around the wheel of BIM, we have the ability to plug our model into analytical software, either provided by Bentley, if we're doing Bentley-based BIM, or provided by third-party vendors. We visualize, so as simple as print screen, paste in an email, send it off to a stakeholder, here's your model, straight up to photorealistic visualizations and animations that take on setup time, production time, etc. We are working on linkages to our specifications now through the tool called SpecWave, where we're actually able to potentially harness BIM information and take a first cut at editing specs based on the information harnessed from the model. Design review and drawings and schedules are the fundamentals. So that middle vertical stream there, that is the de facto for CH2M Hill projects. We make a model, we walk through it and review it, and we make drawings and schedules. Then on the left there, we've got class detection, so automated routines versus visual soft detection analysis. We can take material quantities in support of cost estimating, and we can apply schedule simulations based on imported schedules from Project or Primavera or any other type of scheduling tool against the components housed within the BIM model itself. And then to further extend it, I only have a couple here, fabrication and procurement specifically. So depending on what type of data is defined as important and carried through beyond the design lifecycle, we could take components like steel beams and send them to a fabricator in order to facilitate the fabrication in their factory based on the data from the BIM. We could take valves and pipes, for example, on a treatment plant and procure them en masse across multiple projects based on the data housed within. And we recently have been tweaking this slide internally. You could have asset management, you could have health and safety plans, etc. So there's a lot that can be done. Now, we talk a lot about degrees of BIM internally. So do you have to do full BIM on every single project or not? And we started with a level 1, and we kind of describe this internally as You can do design type charrettes, layout block diagrams using a tool like EcoSim. Those layouts carry intelligent room data information and can be pulled into a schedule and analyzed, and eventually can be automated into a level 2 type where you have one or more disciplines functioning in an intelligent modeling environment. We have some projects where we have external subs who may do MEP in 2D, we'll do architectural structural in 3D, and we kind of make them jive. The next level would be a multidiscipline full BIM model, but with limited information. So we're doing it really just for design review and drawings and schedules, and then to this level that I call super BIM. Now, internally, we've been calling this level 1, 2, 3, 4. Recently, with the BS 1192 standard coming out of the UK, they called it level 0, 1, 2, 3. Similar type definitions, and we're doing a lot of work in our offices in the UK to ensure that we're able to satisfy these BS 1192 requirements and reach what they call a common BIM level 2 deployment, which in this vernacular would be what I'm calling level 3 full multidiscipline BIM. Now that's just focusing on design. So if I look at this lifecycle data flow, everything I showed in that initial wheel of BIM is kind of covered in the blue blob there. So we do design, we do our walkthroughs, quantity, schedules, drawings, etc. But we can now take that model, and we'll talk about it holistically for a moment. The model continues into procurement and construction, and we can create work packages, construction phasing, staging payment plans, layouts, as-built models, etc. Holistically, it can go into operation and maintenance, so that same model can then grow with respect to how much information is contained within the model and leverage owner-operator review, health and safety analysis, evacuation planning, and linkages to facility management systems. And then beyond operations, if a building is to be decommissioned, we could know how much material needs to be recycled, disposed of, or if a building is to be repurposed, we then have an as-built BIM model and an as-operated BIM model in order to plan the future life of that project. Now I said look at it holistically because in reality, some components won't require anything additional than what's added to the model during design. So I'm thinking, for example, you could have a piece of furniture placed in the model so you can get a count of cubicles in an office building. Well, when it's constructed, the information that was from the design model might be all that's required in construction. But in our example, we like to define what's called an asset of importance. So if we're doing a treatment plant, and I know that in a treatment plant, the pumps and the valves and the pipes are of prime importance, we'll track those specifically during design, knowing that throughout the life cycle supply chain, more and more information will be added. So what vendor was selected, what type of pump, what's the maintenance schedule on it, when components replaced, when is it scheduled to be completely holistically replaced, etc. Whereas other items like the finish on the floor might not carry as much prominence, and thus when it's modeled data during design might suffice. So define your asset of importance, track it throughout the life cycle of the project. We then looked at, well, how do we build these teams? So CH2M Hill, we're a dispersed company with users all over the globe. Now, some BIM software focus on what's called a centralized database. And that's doable, but this graphic is trying to depict that depending on where you are in the world, you'll have a different connection to that centralized database, and thus the perception might be, well, BIM doesn't work because it takes me forever to move a component. So we take the federated approach where it's like sending puzzle pieces across the globe. We each own and author our specific federated portion of the model, and we have a glue that allows us to share these components across. There are times when we have to utilize both a centralized database as well as a set of federated models simultaneously, and we work and plan that through our BIM execution plan. I'll come back to the glue that pulls it all together in just a moment. So then finally, when we look at metadata management, we then start to look at, well, BIM is divided, in our view, into three focus areas: building, civil, and plant. So what are we modeling? Is it a building component, a civil, a plant component? What is it? What tool am I going to be using? So how am I modeling it? What type of space does it take up? If I specify three types of vendors, are there three different potential sizes? How do I account for that? Depending on whether I'm building civil or plant, I will select a specific tool, and that specific tool will drive certain required data to be placed in the model. So using EcoSim Building Designer, if I want to place a wall, well, first I have to say place wall, so the tool knows it's a wall. Then I have to enter some particulars about the wall before I can even place the wall. So I'm already forced to fill out information. And then what type of unique information or unique identifiers are required? So if I'm doing a door, being an architect, I'm very familiar with that, obviously. You know, I place the door. Is the door fire rated? I'm going to give it a door number. What type of hardware? Am I using a hardware type, or am I using hardware in specific? So closers, hinges, locks, etc. I can start to build that information while I'm selecting and placing the component. So in the world of Bentley, you list your type of component, and depending on what you're modeling, it will drive us to a specific BIM authoring software. We select the representation of it, and I always like to say, don't dwell on the frivolous, because over the years when we try to do design review, if you're modeling the door hinge or you're modeling the buttons on a control panel, it bogs down the model with frivolous information that doesn't help the depiction of the tool, the procurement of the component, or the procurement of the component, or anything beyond. What data comes from the software? So parts and families are in the building. We've got flow streams in, or service identifications in the plant side, etc. What do you have to place? And then what uniqueness, as I said, can you add in lieu of that? And you ask the question for each and every component as you're modeling, and then once our users became familiar with that, it would start to become second nature. They know that if they're going to model a column, there's components and metadata to select in order to place the column in the model. So we'll talk about the glue. So the glue connects us together. So ProjectWise is our document management and content management system. It enables us to create content. So we're creating content in the BIM authoring software. We have to manage the content, deploy it globally, deliver to the right audience in the right form, and ensure that it is the correct and accurate and current content. We want to preserve what we've built so we can reuse and we can quality check, and as standards and content change over time, we're able to revisit, re-review, re-quality check, and continue to reuse, and all the while collaborating so we can share and work share across the globe, thus enabling us to leverage our expertise anywhere. So for those who haven't seen ProjectWise, we've got full connectivity via a desktop application, and there also is a SharePoint application with respect to a lighter version, a lighter ability to connect. Now in SharePoint, we tend to tell our stakeholders that you can access via this environment to review static production, so PDFs, iModels, etc. But to author content, you want to use the real ProjectWise environment, and we'll talk a bit about that here. So if anybody's thinking, well, what exactly is ProjectWise? Why is it? Why are you guys using it? I like describing it as just a bunch of servers scattered across the globe. So CH2M Hill, when we are set up, our architecture of the system has a corporate data center that's housed for us within Denver and London, and from that corporate data center internally we cache to local offices. So we have a data center server, a bunch of servers in a local office, information moves to and from those offices. Then through the gateway server, we're able to connect external entities who have their own ProjectWise infrastructure, or external entities just connecting via the laptop. The biggest benefit about ProjectWise is it brings us this Delta file transfer. Thus, as we're sharing information all across the globe, we send the entire file the first time and then just the changes the next time. So our corporate data center is like a puppet master, and all the other pieces around are like puppets, and it's pulling the strings, ensuring synchronization all across the globe and ensuring that the most accurate information or the most accurate bits and bytes have been transferred to and from every single user that touch a portion of a project. And then this slide is to demonstrate that ProjectWise is just a smaller piece of a much bigger puzzle. So for us, when we look at program or project management, ProjectWise for us manages our engineering applications, our design applications, our specifications. We then have it integrated with SharePoint, and that allows us to utilize SharePoint for its calendar integration with Office, its announcements, etc. SharePoint has the web part that allows us to let ProjectWise be viewed through SharePoint, so we can have management look at, for example, a set of PDFs or a set of iModels from the SharePoint environment peering into ProjectWise. And then showing here EB Insight as the document controls interface. We use that as a possible solution in order to control set transmittals, peer back into the ProjectWise infrastructure to leverage raw content, PDF content, etc., manage change, manage reviews, etc., and deploy that side of the project. With ProjectWise, we have a very heavy focus on resource distribution. So using Delta file transfer and caching, it actually will grab all the models, all the flat files, base map files, shared central models for Revit, grab all that content, locally cache it on my machine, and then bits and bytes. We then also want to share what we call our resource files or our data sets. So we have a robust CAD data set for AutoCAD and MicroStation to bring complete interoperability across the platforms. We also have data sets for building, civil, and plant that we globally deploy. Now, when we do that, we utilize a tool called ProjectWise Resource Manager, which we developed internally as an add-on to ProjectWise. So this workflow, you access the collaboration system being ProjectWise, check out a file, locally caches your references and or updates them. And then for us, we kick in this tool saying, well, the first time you check out a file, we're going to throw you some compressed content, maybe up to 10, 15 zip or cab files containing the data sets for platform, building, civil, and plant. Open your content, author it, and check it back in. So the way that works is we have this synchronization that's perpetually occurring, still leveraging Delta file transfer, but we have a set of compressed resources. So for open plant, plant space, base MicroStation, base AutoCAD, EcoSim, the various Bentley building versions, etc. When a user accesses the system, the content, just those compressed files, get locally cached to the user's system, and then once it's locally cached, it gets deployed. So when we go through this process, the deployment of the resource using EcoSim, for example, I believe our data set has about 4,000 files. So instead of locally caching 4,000 files out of ProjectWise every single time I open and update a file, it'll locally cache my one EcoSim compressed resource. When it verifies, and if I have the most current resource, then I'm good. If I need an update, it will bring me down the change of the update and then locally deploy it to my machine. Our workspaces, our project configuration files will all then be referencing these deployed locations, and ProjectWise Resource Manager ensures that the content that's expanded to our C drives is the most current synchronized content with that which is being deployed from ProjectWise. Also, since it is C drive based, we have complete flexibility to extend this to anybody outside of the CH2M Hill environment because there is no dependency on our networks or our servers. So that's what I'm saying here, critical to move the dependency away from external resources. So we're sharing models, whether it's the centralized database or the federated approach. The more that we can enable users to open content, unplug their system and work, that means they're working locally on their C drive and connecting and moving content to and from ProjectWise. Synchronization is facilitated so that most current is always on the machine when content is launched prior, assuming someone has to be disconnected. So my example there is I'll go on a plane, I can work on my model because I pulled the content down from ProjectWise prior to getting on the plane. So we want to remove the need for connection to our networks or various secured cloud services by allowing for access through our cloud, which is our ProjectWise infrastructure, grab the content, work, and then send it back. This enables us to work with, as I said, with externals, not only for Bentley data sets, but also when we're converting to AutoCAD and we have to deploy AutoCAD profiles. This synchronization that we've enabled through ProjectWise has allowed us to utilize one configuration, which is C drive based, which is thus extendable to anybody sitting across the globe. So I'm going to talk a bit about the BIM tools now, and I have a couple diagrams that I'm going to walk through here. And these are to show kind of the whole picture together. So we'll start again with the glue. So ProjectWise is our hub. And as we develop these BIM solutions, we look to develop them using ProjectWise as our foundation to enable collaboration. So looking at a Bentley-only solution, this would be typical of what we do within our water business group at CH2M Hill. So our civil solution would be Inroads or Geopack, and actually I should add MX there as well because we have several international locations that use that tool. These tools are integrated with ProjectWise and allow us to move content to and from the system. Our building solution is EcoSim, and we do have several projects that are still, were started with Bentley Building, well, EcoSim SS4 or SS3 or Bentley Building V8i SS1, some still using Bentley Building XM. So that's fine, right? All of the building solutions are integrated with ProjectWise. We do our architectural, structural, building mechanical, and building electrical disciplines through that tool. Now, everything is DGN based, so the models can be referenced with each other. MicroStation is our platform, and from the DGN models, we're able to extract or capture content through dynamic views and represent them into sheet models in the MicroStation environment. When I say MicroStation, consider Navigator there as well, so that's the design review / full review tool in existence. Now, on the plant side, we have what we have defined as process mechanical equipment or process equipment, piping, including our yard piping that has to integrate with civil, instrumentation and controls, that's our term is I&C, and also plant electrical. So when we look at that, today we're predominantly using PlantSpace across the globe. So this is still PlantSpace XM. That tool has a SQL database backbone with one-way communication, reading the database to build content within the model itself. The database contains our specifications, which drive what components and content should be used based on sizes, materials, and flow streams that are being selected for placement within the plant models. PlantSpace can reference into building and civil with no issues, as well as deliver content into MicroStation. We also have fully deployed OpenPlant Power PID as our intelligent P&ID solution. It has a bidirectional communication to a SQL database backbone, so we can have several P&IDs with data provenance within the DGN file itself. And then we can have all the P&IDs push the information back to the database, so we can query and have a look at this within the database as a whole itself. And it's DGN based. It can be referenced into any one of the other applications and deliver via MicroStation. We also use Bentley Cable and Raceway Management, and we kind of jumped on this tool right when it was deployed. I guess that was November 2011, a parametric solution for the modeling of cable trays. And that was huge for us because prior to BRCM, we were replacing linear forms in the old Triforma tool and kind of perpetuating that through the building app. The BRCM tool, again, fully parametric, depictions of various cable trays, linked to a SQL database backbone so we can query, etc. And now we're actually looking at expanding our solution, which we'll get to in a moment. BRCM can be referenced within the entire stream, feed MicroStation, and thus feed our deliverables. So we could deliver in MicroStation. When we have clients that say we're a DWG client, we need an AutoCAD deliverable, not a concern. Our standards being, I mentioned earlier, interoperable. So we save from MicroStation to AutoCAD, and we can then provide the deliverables accordingly. And we also, through Navigator, we can deliver iModels. Through EcoSim, we can deliver IFCs, or we can pretty much deliver anything, right, out of this tools. Now, going forward, we're looking at the ability to globally deploy Open Plant Modeler today, and we'll talk a bit about that in a moment, and also looking at the influence that Promise E can bring to have intelligent schematics linked to BRCM and help populate the cable trays. So that's kind of our Bentley solution, and I'm going to very quickly go through the rest now. Again, ProjectWise is the hub. Here's Bentley and Intergraph. So we have the same building and civil tools, and we have some projects now where the client is requiring the use of Smart Plant 3D. So from the plant perspective, we have an intelligent 3D piping model which has a SQL database backbone, as well as Smart Plant P&ID. Those two tools talk together, but they're kind of out there. I can't reference back into Bentley, so how do we have a multidiscipline BIM like I described in that first slide? Our deliverable would be MicroStation, AutoCAD, CMI.dgns, but we can now deliver the view files or the Smart Plant databases. So this would be the requirements from a client, but to enable work sharing and interoperability, we've been bringing content from ProjectWise out into Smart Plant 3D. So you can convert down to V7, and we've been experimenting now with just using V8 and getting into the most current Smart Plant. It's pretty smooth. It's quite the process, but it can get there. And we've also now started to plug in the iModel composition service. So it allows us to take the Smart Plant model, complete with all the filters defined, create a folder structure based on the filters, and drop iModels into ProjectWise, which can then be direct referenced into the building and civil products. From an Autodesk standpoint, we've had projects where we have Civil 3D as a requirement, as well as Revit. So, whoa, that just jumped. Sorry, guys. So, and then we'll have AutoCAD as our deliverable, and then MicroStation on the back end. So what we're having here is Revit using the iModel plugin can get us an i.dgn file in ProjectWise to use in our Bentley-based plant delivery. And ProjectWise has enabled us to place the Civil 3D data shortcuts from Civil 3D into ProjectWise as well. So ProjectWise is now managing the central model of Revit, the data shortcut projects of Civil 3D, and providing a medium to get Autodesk BIM authored content into the world of Bentley. But just to make things a little more complicated, of course, we have again our deliverables. But from the AutoCAD perspective, we can grow our Bentley plant solution because that's where we have our most robustness. But we have Autodesk projects that are now asking, hey, can you use Intergraph's CADWorks? Can you use our new Plant 3D? Can you use Revit MEP? And I didn't even put in Bentley AutoPlant, right? So the AutoCAD-based solutions from a plant perspective are quite there's many of them. ProjectWise has allowed us to say, well, let's take whichever one we have to utilize, but we can still manage content and build teams through the ProjectWise interface. And then finally, looking at Bentley, if I have this whole Bentley solution that I described 3 slides ago, we then have others. So we have projects where SolidWorks comes into play. A vendor or a supplier says, hey, we only build our unique mechanical component using SolidWorks, or Autodesk Inventor, AutoCAD Inventor. These are unique tools that don't integrate with ProjectWise, but we want to manage the authorship of the content and especially version control and track it specifically to meet the UK's BS 1192. So to do that, ProjectWise has the ability to make the link set files. And what we'll do is we'll store the native content in ProjectWise, use the link set to extract the collection or the composition of components and files required to utilize those types of tools, work offline to author them, and then send that set file back into ProjectWise. Lets us maintain interoperability and authorship of the content, and sharing it across, we can share the outputs from those tools within the rest of our environment. Okay, so ProjectWise being the glue, all those various BIM tools, internally at CH2M Hill, we've looked and said, well, we've got to go from large to small offices and deploy this content. So ProjectWise let us look at this and say, well, we have delivery centers, large centers, small centers, project offices, etc. They might vary from 1 person to 10 people to 200 people to 500 people. It doesn't matter. ProjectWise lets us enable work share from any one of these places. The BIM execution plan then steps back and says, well, let's map how information is going to flow. So we look at this level 2 diagram as kind of our compilation for any and all BIM uses, whether it's drawings, quantification, cost estimating, etc. We're going to take our content, we're going to link the BIM plan with various other project level plans, our design checklist, our quality plan, our document control, hold a bunch of meetings, continue communication. And notice all of this is the people side. The first 4 boxes are all people focused. BIM and technology does not remove the need to talk, right? So that all happens. Then we develop this CH2M Hill model here. Whatever the tool, the collection of BIM authoring tools are, the content gets authored, gets modeled, gets reviewed by what we call a PAL, Project Automation Lead. This is showing Navigator, it could be Navisworks, it could be something else. We review, we clash detect, we go through this cycle to and from the team, back into the models, back into the review, continue that circle until finally we're at a point of delivery, and we can deliver quantities, takeoffs, drawings, schedules, stuff to asset management, etc. Or we can finally have our as-built, our record, our as operated, etc. So we go through that entire process for each project. So very quickly, design constructability review, some of the benefits BIM brings us, we're able to look at this and say, well, instead of trying to interpret that drawing, we'll look at the space, we will collect the models, look at the space as a whole, understand how the components go together, can it be built, is that the right stage to build content, analyze that accordingly. We can clash detect. So Navigator is awesome at this, right? Press a couple buttons, reference A to reference B, level X to level Y, process, a couple seconds later, it starts showing me all of these clashes. Where are things touching other things? There's some pretty good suppression rules, and you can get a good report from what's new, what's been addressed, what's still existing, and you can kind of mitigate this. This Excel report, you can pass that around to design managers, but the interactive reporting, to get a team on a quick live meet, cycle through these clashes and say, look, okay, some of these are maybe okay, but you know what, beam going through door, you got to fix that, right? That's just not acceptable. We can simulate construction, so we have a project where we've tried to schedule the content. When we're looking to do schedule simulations, what we stress with our modelers is be cognizant of how you model, or else we cannot schedule. And this little diagram, the concrete slab into the 3 pours. I like showing that on these presentations because it just gets that message across. If I want to show that the concrete's going to show up in 3 pours, I can't model it as one component. Another example is we have a 5-story building. You can't model the steel column 5 stories high. It can never get to site, first of all, and that's not how it'll be built. So as long as modelers are thinking model as it should be constructed, take educated assumptions during design, refine during construction, you got something pretty robust. Quantification, couple clicks of a button and we get reports, whether it's in the building, the civil, or the plant tools. And I'll just cycle through this here, but this is an example of a concrete report from our building model. We have a robust list of parts and families that our estimators want us to divide the content, so we've set data group catalogs based on what were initially just parts. Hit a couple buttons and the content can be estimated for us. Same with the steel. This is just going through various sets. You can see all the types of steel that are in existence within any given project or model. We can get full reports of those. We can isolate them for steel type or just show everything in its entirety. Energy analysis, we've attempted to use EcoSim Energy Simulator to pull a GBXML export of our building model into Simulator, run some simulations. We also use some third party where we try to pull content out. This is more of a work in progress work in progress for energy. Structural, we have been playing with some EcoSim to STAD-RAM using the ISM as the convert medium. So we have some engineers that gravitate to that. Others, sometimes that's a little bit of a barrier, and they'll just say, you do your model, we'll do our analysis, we'll make sure the two jive type thing. And then in closing, I want to talk a little bit about leveraging data for the last couple of slides, and then we'll be open up to questions. So, as I said, the quantity. So it's not just quantification, but we can now, with EcoSim, this was kind of revolutionary for us. So EcoSim brings the ability to quantify absolutely anything. And that's what's huge for us, is that everything has data group as a backbone. Thus, I place it in the model. I can quantify it, complete with areas too. So areas of a net, so I can do the form work, and areas, gross, and then also net, so I can do the finishes if there's holes cut within the slabs. Same with the walls or anything vertical. We built our data group catalog so that we have a robust set of data definitions in the wall, and thus we're able to quantify any vertical component, understanding volumes, areas, both gross and net. From the civil side, Inroads, Geopack, and MX has various abilities to leverage the data housed within the DTM, pull it out, query it, understand it, and this is just showing a cut-fill quantity from our earthwork as an example. Now finally, I want to talk a bit about what we're doing with plant, and this is quite the diagram here, so I'll just go through it step by step. But we're basically using what we call our CH2M Hill Material Management System, which is our procurement system, to house our spec narratives, or what we're calling our line class specs. So we're building the ability to understand all the components on a plant model that we would want to model, design, procure, and deliver. So this tool also gives us a neutral format that we can then feed potentially Open Plant, Auto Plant, Smart Plant, and eventually CADWorks as well. So regardless of how many vendors are at play here, we're working from one common data backbone. We then develop this line class spec based on the components and the content housed within our system. We model the component. We'll be able to model it in Open Plant Modeler. In parallel, we have, in theory, initially built the intelligent P&ID, and we have the consistency reporting across Open Plant P&ID and Open Plant Modeler. We're able then to, through the MCS, connect to ProjectWise, produce final spec narratives and reports based on the content housed within the system, and deliver information, whether it's drawings, PDFs, iModels, and etc. Now, the iModels are unique for us because that opened up a whole new world of what we can do. So notice here I have in small letters here, ODBC queries, snapshots, deltas. Big thing for us internally, especially on design build projects. We want to be able to take two iModels at any given point in time and track the change. So we have a little tool that we've written where we query the iModel, because the iModel is now available for query within our Windows environment, and we first look and say, well, here's what was in iModel number 1 at date X. Here's what's in iModel number 2 5 days later. We can then analyze, you can see here, the thickness of the pipe, the additional reducer. We can analyze that change. Does that have an impact to us? Is it fit for purpose? Did it increase cost of our project, etc.? And we can look at that at any moment as we're producing iModels using ProjectWise's iModel generator at any time. So, and that's the other thing as well. With ProjectWise as the backbone, iModels and PDFs are being generated server-side. So we check in a model, we check in a model to ProjectWise, we get an iModel generated automatically, thus facilitating the ability to do Delta reports. From our plant information, we take that data, fill out these data sheets, and that's using our data manager, and we've built customized data sheets within data manager to generate all of this equipment list, motor data sheets, etc., leveraging information in the P&IDs so we're not duplicating info. Finally, so when you're managing data flow, consider the information. I mentioned an asset of importance. What are we looking to track and why? Who's creating the data? Who owns the data? What software owns the data? Who are the stakeholders? And then when you think of the data flow, this is an internal slide that I won't go through in any means, but the idea is project definition through to post-design detailed design. We would look at what disciplines come in first. So P&IDs and process, when we're looking at a plant, they're first out of the box, defining the component, defining everything, integrating their information then into mechanical, civil, and the building disciplines, and then we kind of flow that information along the life cycle. Those P&IDs are hitting 100% while we're starting to get more of a robust model going forward. So finally for us, key benefits based on everything I've described. I know that was a lot in 40 minutes. Global work sharing. Deliver from anywhere in the globe, internal or external to CH. We connect the team. So very important for us. Multiple platform BIM deployment. So we are, our plant solution is very robust in the world of Bentley. We have other business sectors in CH2M Hill that are using Intergraph. And at the end of the day, we have clients that say, give me some Revit, give me some AutoCAD. ProjectWise glues all of that together for us and empowers WorkShare. We're able to leverage data through a life cycle, so we define an asset of importance, and we focus on it, and we're able to deliver that. We visualize. We're more efficient because we're updating components once, leveraging it on any of our output deliverables. Change orders have been reduced. So when I'm asked what's the tangible for a BIM project when we go into construction, that is proving to be the, and it's in all the BIM literature, but we are seeing that when everything jives in the model, it jives on site. Change orders are reduced. And we're improving the quality. So, we're seeing changes. We're understanding the ramification of changes even later in design, how it impacts the other disciplines, quantities to estimators, so quantity of concrete. We are so confident when we give that to our estimators because we're confident in how it's being modeled in our BIM authoring tools. And with that, I think we can open up to questions.
Okay, Brent, thank you very much. Again, this is Paul Bonington, publisher of Engineering News Record. We're pleased to be hosting this presentation today together with Bentley Systems, our program sponsor. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. All questions that we can't get to will be sent to the program sponsor, Bentley, for review and follow-up. So let's pick one question here that I think is a thread I'm seeing through a number of the questions. And that cuts to this question of ROI. Owners are obviously looking for return on investment, and so are the users of these technologies. Can you maybe quantify and expound on the ROI we're seeing from the use of these modeling techniques?
Yeah, well, quantify is always difficult. Definitely expand. So we have, owners have expressed I guess gratitude in that they're able to understand what we're designing from the very beginning. So the design review sessions become far more robust because during 30, 60, and 90, we're able to actually show them what's happening without giving them, 30% drawings are, there's not much to understand in a 30% drawing. So visualization is key. Meaningful design review. We're able to understand from an owner's perspective what are their assets of importance. So on a water treatment plant, they'll be able to give us particulars about their asset management system, and we can ensure that we have the potential for data linkages or data threads from designing construction models into operations. So they're able to ensure that their information is input once and understood and potentially linked to from their review model. And their plant operators are very appreciative of walking through the models, especially while the designs are under design and into construction.
Great. Okay. This next question refers back to your earlier reference on the Penn State modeling matrix. What do you use to model process pipe? And what portion of the Penn State modeling matrix do you use to coordinate the modeling requirements?
So what the tool we use for process piping today is PlantSpace, and we're moving into Open Plant Modeler, and this is in our water business sector. The rest of CH actually has other tools that are being used as well. But in the Penn State plan, it was the model inclusion charts were weak with respect to process piping, so we had to supplement some of that with our legacy. So we had what we call the design automation plan. So within there we had charts on what we model from a piping standpoint, and we now include that as an add-on to the Penn State plan. And it goes into details like we'll model everything, I think, 4 inches or greater unless changed at the project level. We specify the type of information as a base that we would like to see in our piping models, the type of equipment, etc. And then we work early on with the client or owner at that point specifically on treatment plants, because we want to make sure that we are modeling the assets that they find to be important, as well as what we need to deliver.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Have your clients benefited from the BIM approach that you've established? Talk about the client side for a second.
Well, we look at the client as an extension of our team. So one main benefit very early on is they're at the table with us, driving through the models, understanding the components that we've placed in there. And, you know, from a if it's a design bid build project, the client is able to, you know, understand what we have, extend that knowledge to their representatives so that it isn't a surprise to the operators with what they have to operate after it's completed. So we're able to actually do operational review, construction review, value engineering, and have the owner really be at the table as our team. And ProjectWise has enabled us to extend the content management to our external entities, one obviously being the client. So they can come into ProjectWise, we give them a secured location where we have them look at our deliverables as they are in progress, and they're able to be play in the sandbox with us.
Okay, great. Let me turn to another question now. Here is the you know, the $64,000 question, if you will. So now I like what I see here. What about deployment costs and the durations of implementing a model such as you presented here?
That's a good question. So obviously, because we've been doing it for, I want to say, decades now. So those initial costs are long ago, but when you deploy this, and I think on that first slide, I identified the survey said it's most popular is the change in workflow. So like I will argue, you know, if somebody knows how to do a bit of Revit, they'll know how to do a bit of EcoSim. If they can do some MicroStation, they could do some AutoCAD. So when you're looking at a holistic BIM solution and we say, well, let's go deploy Bentley, and then we're trying to work with other entities where they might be using other platforms, I will say it's like changing a pencil. So when I look at that, I'll say, well, what pencils are all of our BIM authors or stakeholders using? So sometimes it's just a review tool. Hey, I'm used to using Solibri. Now you're telling me I have to use Navigator. Yep, so we'll put some videos out there on YouTube to help our external entities work with that. When we're looking at actually deploying the modeling software themselves, for me it's, can you think in 3D, and will you accept the fact that the model is the source? If the answer is yes to both of those, then what we like to do is kind of give some tool overviews. So we make some e-tutor learning videos that we have deployed internally, just showing, you know, how do you open EcoSim? How do you place a wall? Like we don't like holding main training sessions for just how to use a tool. We'll kind of let users go off and learn that. And then on the project, we'll kind of pull a team together and let them know that they're all kind of dependent on each other based on that workflow slide I showed, and then get them hopefully stewarded to the concept that the model is your source, you build your outputs, and there are specific pieces of data that are important to consider.
Okay, next question I think ties into that, but it's tugging a little deeper, I think. The question is, would you please explain your use of iModels in a little bit more detail and then drill into examples, I guess a couple of specific examples of how they provided value?
That sounds good. So our iModels, we use them as our design review medium and our medium for data delivery. So the iModels for us have provided huge value because they take the data provenance of the BIM authoring tool, and I think that's a line straight out of a Bentley presentation, but it is true. So I can give an iModel to anyone across the globe. They don't need to have OpenPlant PNID, Modeler, Plant Space, EcoSim, Inroads, and now Revit, and now SmartPlant. Don't need any of that. You just look at your iModel. So I now take the iModel of a multi-platformed BIM project. I can now design review, I can query, I can clash detect, and for us internally now, this concept of the Delta report. So not only can you open it up in Excel or Access, you can now start to compare the two different databases, and you can understand changes that have occurred throughout the course of a project. That is a huge deal for us. Whereas in the past, prior to iModels, if I wanted to query a plant space model, I got to open plant space, or I got to open the inroads DTM, or I have to, etc. So this has completely changed how we can do this, and the fact that it plugs into Revit has allowed us to have, we have the architectural Revit subconsultant. That's fine. Work in Revit, ProjectWise can house the Revit, publish your iModel, and we now have a full integrated solution. The other thing ProjectWise gives us is the automatic iModel generation. So we set a whole bunch of models, BIM models, on a project to have an iModel produced anytime they're checked back into ProjectWise. So that concept of creating the iModels, that's all server-side. So all of a sudden now we have our design review models with complete data provenance being created automatically when files are checked in. That's pretty cool.
Great, thanks for that thorough answer. We talked about duration. We talked about costs a little bit. Now, this question is interesting. The use of BIM does require a very well-trained project team and smooth implementation processes. Can you give some insights on how you approach training for the team as well as the processes that need to go along with that?
Okay, let's take processes first. So part of my role as the BIM delivery leader is deployment of the tools. So what I've worked very hard for is to have a situation where to set up a project, it's about a 1 hour internal process. So we create the project in ProjectWise. There's a standard configuration, standard setup, standard folder structure. Now it's ready to work, and it can work with any Bentley BIM tool, Revit, or Civil 3D out of the box. So that setup process, so I guess you can call it the burden on the project to set up BIM, is removed. And for me, that was a huge step one. So I don't have to open up plant space and build my plant space database and understand my pipe schedule and determine does flow stream X under material Y only have these sizes. All of that's being done at a corporate level. We've then empowered what we call our project automation leads, but that's analogous to a BIM lead, a CAD lead, whatever the term is, to actually customize each and every component. So you have building, civil, and plant. I've written routines enabling our automation leads to customize the tools if needed to meet project needs. And then finally, from a workflow process, we've done a lot of stewardship for our modelers, whether they're designers or engineers or techs, etc., to understand that integration that we each have, that dependency for me on you. So if I'm the architectural model, you're the structural modeler, we're not in a vacuum, we're working together in the same space, etc. So a lot of work's been put on that, and then that kind of leads into the training. So training touches on those processes first. Before I teach you how to press a button and place a wall, I want to teach you to know that your model is dependent on everybody else and we all work in a complete whole. Then we talk about the tools. So we focus on here's how you use ProjectWise, here's how you use MicroStation, and then we kind of isolate into a couple little groups. Here's how you run the plant space tool, the EcoSim tool, the inroads tool, and now go off and learn. And they'll always be on the project learning, and that will decrease with each and every project that a modeler is on.
Great. Okay, let's talk about document management. On document management, do you manage all of your project documents using ProjectWise? Does this include documents from vendors, letters, RFIs, and the procurement documents as well?
We are pushing towards a 100% ProjectWise solution, and so it kind of varies. We do have SharePoint active as well, and the linkage between ProjectWise and SharePoint. So our initial rollout was design documentation only, so work in progress drawings and specs. And now, with the use of with the emergence of the Bentley transmittal service on ProjectWise, our document controls team is having a look to see how feasible it could be to put everything in. Now, in the United Kingdom, the British government is mandating a common data environment by 2016. So for us, ProjectWise gives us that because we actually have the ability to manage all our models within ProjectWise, our deliverables, and now potentially all of our content as well. So and then for the vendors, yes, when we're able to, since we can extend ProjectWise to external entities, we now go through processes where we have an extended team, suppliers, vendors, or anyone else down the supply chain. We can plug them into ProjectWise, make a security group for them, give them a working folder, and even if they're not working off of ProjectWise, their content can be housed in ProjectWise so that it has audit trail and we're able to manage it as a whole.
Great, thank you. This is also a question related to ProjectWise. What is the role of ProjectWise Resource Manager in your process?
So this add-on for us was our ability to take large CAD and BIM data sets and deploy one file versus many. So, using the EcoSim, it's a 5,000 file data set potentially. We can compress that into one file, deploy it, and then compress it on the user side. So your Delta file transferring just the one compressed file versus 5,000 many files. The other thing it gives us is the ability to control registry settings. So if I'm launching OpenPlant P&ID, plant space, or BRCM, I can actually write the project routes for plant administrator. I can write the ODBC connection for BRCM or for plant space in an XML file deployed by Resource Manager, and then we write those registry keys to each computer. And that's also how we actually get the ability to do the AutoCAD profile as well.
Great. Okay, thanks. Here's an interesting question, and it has to do with roadblocks encountered. So these can be internal or from part of the project team, the contractors involved. Has CH2M Hill encountered any roadblocks internally or from contractors as you've established these processes? And if so, what's the process to resolve them?
Yeah, there's been tons of roadblocks over the years. Sometimes it's as simple as, well, we don't want to change. We don't want a different workflow. What we've done worked for 30 years, et cetera. Contractors saying we have our own environment. We're not interested in ProjectWise. We're using whatever. So, when we're faced with those, the internal ones, what we try to do is establish our enterprise-wide workflows. So we do have an overall quality management system that mandates document control, content collaboration, so it mandates the use of ProjectWise and SharePoint in a tandem. So that kind of helps us now, but years ago it was difficult to overcome those, and it just took time. So we took little wins, right? We'll go and somebody says, don't do BIM. Okay, so I'm going to do a model. I might make a pretty picture from my model. Somebody says, wow, how did you do that? I say, well, I had a model. And it kind of goes in that circle, and that slowly grows over time. Our estimators, well, we don't trust what's in your model. That's okay. You guys can do your estimate. I'm going to give you the quantity of concrete. And then when they do their estimate and the quantity, now we're within, 2-3%. Now they have a greater trust for the quantities from the model. And external entities, the same concept. If they don't trust it, we ask them to, like if it's a design build, we'll have them place their content on, but not work within. We'll offer up the services. We'll show them using the Resource Manager, for example. Look, we could spend 8 hours configuring your system to read the standards, or we can just go ahead and connect to ProjectWise, everything's done, I don't have to touch anything. So, little wins as you go over time. Understand the barrier. I would say appreciate the barriers. Appreciate why you're getting roadblocks and pushbacks, and work through them, or work with them, I guess is the right word.
Great. Okay. Let me go back to cost. This is just an interesting perspective. You've gone to BIM, and what effect has it had on your overall design cost versus the traditional 2D? Can you quantify that at all for the audience?
Well, what we portray is that it has not increased. So we'll offer our client a BIM solution and say, still we do price projects per sheet. So anybody who does BIM knows I can cut 1 sheet, I can cut 10 sheets. Doesn't really matter from a graphics generation, but you still have to create the drawings and everything. So we still price per sheet based on legacy information, and it helps us to drive, initial budgets when there aren't even any design staff involved yet. And we're able to bring added value for the same cost as it would be a 2D delivery. And some people within our offices will tend to say, well, if you force me to do 2D, I will struggle because it takes me longer. And I'm one of them. If you tell me, Brent, you can't have an architectural model, I'm not as efficient, right?
Right. Great. Next question, is this multi-system solution realistic for smaller projects as well as some of the mega projects that we know you've used them on? How does the scale affect the deployment?
I would say yes, because a lot because of ProjectWise and how we've deployed. So if you have a robust setup, right, turn a project on, all my Bentley tools will work with our enterprise solution, whether it's a big project or a small project. That's the goal we have pushed for years and years. Now, if I have Revit in the play, and you say to me, well, it's a small project, we have an external architect who's going to use Revit, that's no different for me than a multi-facility wastewater treatment plant where an architect is going to do Revit. It's the same from a setup and a BIM coordination standpoint, there's still Bentley and Revit at play. Intergraph, the smart plant setup, is quite intense for us from what we're experiencing. So if you told me we have a little pump station and we're going to use Smart Plant 3D as well as Bentley, I might ask the question there just because the setup, but if we had an enterprise setup for the smart plant side, again, I would have that same comment. It's no different. It's plugged into ProjectWise, and we can just make it work. So, but we do analyze. Whenever it's cross-platform, we definitely ask the question at the beginning, is it feasible? Should it be just Bentley or efficiency? And then we look at the influences on the project.
Great. And in terms of the percentage of projects in your designs, how many are actually completed in this BIM process, or a very similar process to what you've described?
Right now, any new project is BIM. Okay, so we used to just say any project is 3D, but the 3D tools are all BIM tools. So using our deployment, any new project is BIM. Any addition to a plant is BIM. And then we ask the question when it's it's a renovation to a plant. So if a client says, I have 2,000 deliverable files, DGN or DWGs, all 2D. We might sit back and say, well, okay, what are we actually doing to this plant? We might offer, hey, we could model the plant for you. We might laser scan the plant, turn it into a BIM. We'll offer the services, but if it's just, we're adding a valve here and we're adding a louver at the end of the hall, and et cetera, we most likely would approach just modification to the existing record content. But we will ask the question for those. But other than that type of situation, it's BIM deployment.
Okay, thank you. This may be related as a follow-on to that. Have you utilized BIM tools in the CH2M Hill program management services, that portion of your business?
Yeah, so what we'll do there, for example, we're working on the Qatar World Cup right now, 2022, and our program management team has a BIM manager, and we've looked at the development of a BIM execution plan for the program as a whole, focusing on defining assets of importance, the need to collaborate, and the need to drive through models and the site as a whole. Now, we understand that with various design partners that will be at play on major programs like that, we looked to provide multi-platform solutions. So there, it's almost a requirement to say, we know there's going to be Autodesk, we know there's going to be Bentley, there's potentially going to be, on a building-focused project, there could be CATIA or Graphisoft or Vectorworks, who knows what might be at play. So we try to build a plan that lays the framework upon which any one of the BIM authoring software can feed. So at World Cup 22, the building content, the data definitions were robustly placed around IFCs so that we know that most if not all building BIM authoring software can feed an IFC file, and then looking at plant from a different perspective. So we kind of take building, civil, plant, look at the interoperability across the platforms, and then write something that's generic enough to apply for the multi-platform solution.
Great, thanks. I'm going to have to cap it with this final question. There's so many, and as I said, Bentley Systems will get to those questions later. We do have time for one more, and I think this is an interesting one to cap off the Q&A with. We know that the engineers, the contractors, the owners, they all have to collaborate. The question is, what do you look for from the material suppliers to support your BIM approach? And what can we do to make, meaning material suppliers, what can we do to make the interface easier for you?
That is a great question. And, you know, we have actually tried to build in our specifications, so on tender specs or even design build specs, the requirement for BIM turnover. And that BIM turnover would help us to feed the content. So think about that life cycle chain slide I had, to make that robustness in that the supplier gives us a BIM model, and we can then place it into our federated model, complete with the data and information being provided by the supplier, populated so that it can now potentially feed the asset management system. Now, you know, in the spec, we're trying to provide guidance, but I think what would be immensely helpful is for the material suppliers to, it would help to understand the BIM authoring softwares that are out there. So building civil plant is one thing, but, you know, Bentley, Autodesk, Intergraph, etc. Understand that, you know, you're going to be supplying on projects where the authoring tools could be one or many, and really be able to work with the BIM authors to ensure that the content can flow to and from that life cycle model. In the UK, the BS 1192 is extending to the supply chain. So we're doing a lot of work. In that example I discussed about SolidWorks. The supplier said, we're a SolidWorks shop. That's how we build our content. So we are looking at workflows to say, well, we can take SolidWorks into ProjectWise, just to hold the content. We can analyze how to get content out of SolidWorks, and then we would work internally to see, well, what's the best to get it into an Autodesk delivery or into a Bentley delivery, and see and work with the supplier back and forth. And as long as there's that dialogue and communication, right? So remember, technology never removes communication. As long as everything's working in tandem, you know, anything can be brought into the system.
Great. Thank you, Brent, for all of your valuable insights from CH2M Hill. It's been a wonderful program. A special thanks to our sponsor, Bentley Systems, for making this program possible. To our audience, you'll be receiving an email shortly containing a link to the on-demand version of today's webinar. Do feel free to pass this along to your colleagues or anyone else who might benefit from today's material. Any questions we weren't able to get to today will be sent over to the sponsor, Bentley Systems, so they can follow up with you individually. And once again, to our audience, Brent, to your presentation and your delivery, we thank you very much. We've enjoyed today's webinar. CH2M Hill, Intelligent Modeling Maximizes Interoperability for Cross-Discipline Project Teams. Have a great day, everyone.